to shoplift. But then there's something else that the experts in crime found, something that they didn't expect at all. There were a lot of elderly people who said that they shoplifted because they felt lonely or because they felt bored and they needed something to do. And when you first think about that, it doesn't quite make sense. But if you think about it a little bit more, it does make sense. There are people who steal things for the pure joy of stealing. One of these elderly people said that he told the police that his wife's illness caused him stress. But when he steals, he feels refreshed on the inside. There is a rush that is associated with stealing. There is this idea that's happening as someone is stealing where they say, am I going to get away with it? Am I going to be caught? Can I make it to the door and make it out? There is a joy that comes with that. There is excitement that comes with that. That's what was attracting some of these elderly people. Sin always gives us pleasure for a short period of time. Any sin gives us pleasure for a short period of time. There is a momentary pleasure that is associated with adultery. There is a momentary pleasure that is associated with lying. There's a momentary pleasure that is associated with stealing. And these elderly people understand that it is fun to get out of the store with something that is not theirs. Stealing adds excitement to an otherwise boring existence. Today we're going to be talking about stealing. We're going to be talking about the theft of property and how it is forbidden by God. We're going to talk about some of the excuses that people use to get away with this commandment. And we're also going to talk about forms of theft that are not thefts of property so much. But first we'll talk about thefts of property. The commandment is very easy to understand. Thou shalt not steal. If you were to explain this to a child, they would be able to understand it. Imagine a couple of kids who are playing together, and one of these kids sees that the other kid has a toy that is nicer than their toy. And so the child takes that toy and he puts it into his pocket and he takes it home with him. And then when he and his mom get home, the mom is looking through the child's clothes, and the mom notices that this new toy is there, some toy that she didn't buy for the child. And so she takes it to the child and she says, where did you get this? Well, that child knows instinctively, down deep in his heart, that there is something wrong with taking something that is not his own. And he is immediately going to feel guilt even before his mother brings punishment to him. It's a commandment that all of us understand. All people have a very natural understanding of ownership. Every society that you go to in the world has laws that permit individuals to own things. And we all naturally know that it is wrong to take someone else's things. We know that there should be some sort of punishment associated with stealing. Any society that would allow stealing outright wouldn't be around for very long. And so you see this idea spread throughout the world that stealing is wrong. We all know it and we all understand it. And so the eighth commandment reminds us of something that we know to be true. It reminds us of something that God has revealed to all men. Stealing is wrong. So if we all know it, why do we steal? Why do human beings steal things? I'm going to talk about a few different reasons. The first reason is that it satisfies sinful wanting. It satisfies sinful wanting. What some people would say in English is coveting. The word coveting means sinful wanting. Wanting something that others have that we shouldn't have. Something that God has not given to us. This is a very normal, sinful desire. We know that God has given us what He's given us and that we should be content with what God has given us, but we sinfully want more. We are greedy for more. Well, stealing always begins with this other sinful desire. There is a sinful desire of coveting, a sinful desire of greedily wanting something that comes before stealing itself. So the sin that leads to stealing is coveting. If you want to satisfy greed, one way of doing that is simply to take what is not yours. And one preacher who was talking about the Eighth Commandment, Brian Edwards, said that stealing takes the weighting out of wanting. Stealing takes the weighting out of wanting. If you're greedy for something, if you really want to have something that somebody else has, one way to do it is to wait for it, to find some legitimate means by which you can buy that thing that someone else has. That's one way to satisfy the sinful wanting in your heart. But stealing takes the weighting out of wanting. If you can't get it by legitimate means and you want it right then, all you have to do is to take it. All you have to do is to steal it. And stealing satisfies this desire, this sinful wanting for a few moments. At the point that you have taken that thing that you desire, that coveting that you have in your heart, that sinful greed is taken care of for a few moments, perhaps for a few days, but not for long. That's because stealing is a sin that always builds on itself. If you satisfy your greedy wanting by stealing, then you will find that wanting will return to you very quickly. And if you go into Proverbs chapter 30, especially verses like 15 and 16, then you see a lot of warnings in the Bible about this greed that is associated with stealing. Proverbs chapter 30 warns us that the desire to steal can't ever be truly satisfied, but is something that builds and builds with each new sin. If you satisfy your greedy wanting by stealing, then you're just going to want more. And then you'll steal more. And then you'll want more. And then you'll steal more. And this path is one that leads to destruction. The writer of Proverbs says that greed is compared to a raging fire, something that burns us up completely. Greed, he says, is something that leads its victims to the grave. And so if you really want to address the sin of stealing, then you have to start with another sin. You have to deal with the sin of greedy wanting. You have to reject this sin completely. And so if you really want to be able to apply this sermon today, the very first thing that you need to do is to ask God to make you happy with what you have. Ask God to make you happy with what He has already given to you. So, a lot of people justify their stealing, a lot of people steal because it satisfies the sinful desire in them, but we also steal because we say that inequality is not fair. We say that inequality is not fair. In America, there is a story that has been around for quite some time, the story of Robin Hood. And if you ask any young kid about Robin Hood, they'll be able to tell you about Robin Hood. Robin Hood is someone who stole from the rich so that he could give it to the poor. And even the Filipinos are nodding at me because they've heard this story as well. They know the story. We've heard of Robin Hood who steals from the rich in order to give to the poor. A lot of people hold Robin Hood as a hero. They say that he did a good thing because he wasn't stealing in order to satisfy his own greed, but he was stealing in order to help other people. What do you think? Imagine this story. Imagine that you were a slave who lived 2,000 years ago. You would be in a situation where you were poor and someone else was rich. Namely, your master was rich. And you would have owned almost nothing. And as a slave, as a normal human being who is a slave, you would have desired to have good things for your wife and for your children. And you would look at your master and you would say, this guy has plenty of money. This guy lives in luxury. And I work for him day and night. And I get hardly anything at all. I need to satisfy this inequality. This inequality is wrong. It's not fair. He's got all the money and I don't. That's the sort of thinking that would happen in your heart if you were a slave 2,000 years ago.